Welcome to Real Talk with your host, Dr. Valencia Campbell, on the Big Talker 1580.
Hello, and welcome to Real Talk. I'm Dr. Valencia Campbell, and I am your host. Real Talk is a weekly radio show designed to address some of the most challenging issues confronting our community, including substance abuse and treatment, finding mentors, the real story about getting into law school or medical school, personal experiences with trying to get a conditional pardon, and so forth. We have really been delighted to have some fantastic shows on, and most recently we had the opportunity to speak with Senator C. Anthony Muse regarding some of the issues confronting the General Assembly, which, as you all know, is currently in session. We also had a recent program with Ms. Shayla Jackson talking about finding a quality mentor, and that was a phenomenal show with a lot of resources. But today's program, we plan to focus on issues confronting young minority males. My guest today is Mr. Armand Hodge. Armand is a 21-year-old senior at Bowie State University. He is currently majoring in communications and business administration and is the assistant managing editor of the Bowie State University, of Bowie State University newspaper and assistant program manager of the WBSU 90.5 FM. He's also involved with the Campus Activities Board. He was a 2011 T. Howard summer intern, and he's also interned at the Office of the Inspector General, as well as Comcast Corporate Communications. Welcome, Armand. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's just get started with having you tell us a little bit about what you see as the number one issue confronting young minority males in your age group, that is the 18 to 25-year-old range.
I would have to say the biggest problem would have to be education. And I would have to say that because you have a lot of young males who are dropping out of school or who don't want to attend college whatsoever. You have many young African-American males out here who are getting involved in violence, doing drugs. Many problems facing our young African-American males that are ruining their lives in the community.
I was going to say one of the things that we hear so much about, and I'm going to just touch on this issue of drugs that you just mentioned, since our group, the Prince George's County Drug Policy Coalition, mainly tries to focus on steering young people away from drug involvement and toward treatment if they do happen to have a problem. But I wanted to mention a couple of things about that and have you comment. One of the things that we do know now in terms of our national data shows that about 50% actually support, that is of the adult population across the country, actually support the legalization of marijuana. And I was curious as to what you're seeing with respect to the university's views on that, the other young people with you. Are they seeing that there is a lot of support for legalizing marijuana? Just what is going on with your campus in terms of the students' views?
I would say it would have to be very mixed on it. On one side of it, marijuana, people think, of course, don't legalize it. Some people believe, it could still do damage to our youth. But then on another hand, you have people saying that legalizing marijuana could, of course, help with many health issues, one being glaucoma, helping out with cancer. Surprisingly, they said cancer in one article. But then, on another hand, some people say do legalize it because it can save our country money. I remember reading an article a couple of weeks ago. If we were legalizing marijuana, it could save our country billions of dollars.
Okay, and we're going to come back to that in a few minutes. But let me also touch on one of the other issues that relates to gun violence, and we'll just kind of get your opinion on a couple of areas before we go
Mm-hmm.
back to this issue on legalizing marijuana. To what extent do you see that as a problem?
It's a big problem in our community. On the news every day, you always see some type of news story about another guy killing another guy or another teenager killing another teenager. And we got to do something about that right now in our community right now, because it's just a shame that as young African Americans, we keep killing each other. Like, we should be embracing each other and trying to helping each other out. And it's just really sad when you are a teenager and you come home and you get bad news that, like, your brother or your sister has been killed, or your uncle or your aunt has been killed. It is a really, really, really major issue in our community.
And so, who do you think would be able to do something about this? I know it begins with all of us as individuals, first of all, trying to find ways to communicate with each other in an appropriate fashion, as opposed to trying to resort to violence. But I'm just curious as to who you would see as important figures, whether this is something that should be placed locally, for example, with the local county exec, or is it something that the governor should be, pushing forward at the state level, or maybe even at the congressional level, which would be, federal types of support. And by that I mean more communication on this particular issue.
I would have to say it's a little bit of both. If we have more opportunities for our youth in our community, I think that they wouldn't be getting into much trouble. Also, mentorship, and it also starts at home. I know some guys don't have fathers in their lives, but just because they don't have a father in their life, they can turn to an older friend who can mentor them, or maybe an uncle or a grandfather, or a friend of a friend that's like a couple of years older than them, because it's something that Steve Harvey he says, if you make better boys, you will create better men. So I think if we start attacking them at a younger level, by the time they get to 21 or 22, they will see the light.
And I think, as you mentioned, particularly this point about mentorship, and that is really, really crucial if we are to be able to take hold of some of these problems beyond the family, because we all know, we like to think that all families are functional and parents are doing what they're supposed to do in terms of raising their children. But in reality, there are other families that don't have that kind of parental role model in terms of providing for their children and so forth. And so I clearly agree with what you're saying about the need for an emphasis on mentoring programs to be able to give back to the community, particularly those who feel they have made it and they're doing well and going home and kind of forgetting about the rest of the community, because we're all in this together. Let me also ask about the issue of stereotypes. To what extent do you believe that is a problem?
It can be a problem at some times. I know in our community, I know one stereotype that is plaguing our youth right now. For some strange reason, I've heard a lot. When you see a tall guy who might have a beard, or a young gentleman who has dreads, you might think they're a knucklehead, and that might not be the case. That's a major stereotype in our community right now. Like, when you see a guy that has dreads, oh, he's a knucklehead. That's not the case. I have many friends who have their hair done a certain way, and some of them are some of the smartest guys I've ever met. Or some with females as well too. If they dress a certain way or talk a certain way, she might be ghetto. Or if a female is from this certain area of the city, she's ghetto. That's not the case, because I have some friends who are from some of the roughest neighborhoods in Baltimore and the Washington, D.C. area, and they're some of the smartest people I know.
Well, I was going to say, we had Dr. Lanice Bias on the show a while back, and that was one of the issues that she touched on, that we need to move beyond a lot of the stereotypes, especially regarding the hairstyles and so forth, because in her view, she was saying these are just fads, just as those of us who are older had various fads that we were into, that we have to look at it that way and to stop being so judgmental and really try to focus on those things that can help our young people to get through this period or phase in their lives, as all of us have gone through, so that they can be the most productive in terms of the things they want to do in the future. Now, I guess one last thing I wanted to mention in this area about the issues facing young minority males is this whole issue of church attendance. To what extent do you believe that should be playing more of a role for our young males?
I would say, of course, go to church. Now, don't hold this against me, because I know I haven't been to a church in a very long time.
That's okay, Armand. That's why I want to hear this.
But people can also understand that just because you don't go to church doesn't mean that the Lord isn't involved in your life. Like, I know that I pray 3 times a day. I read the Bible. God has been very good to me, my parents, my family, and my mastermind circle of friends around me. But I think church will play a huge part on our youth life, because I know growing up, me and my mother, we were going to church every Sunday. I know when I used to go stay summers with my grandmother in North Carolina, we went to church on Sundays. And I think me going to church, I might didn't like it when I was a younger kid sitting there for 2 hours, but it did have an impact on my life now, to the point where I do appreciate the blessings that I have been blessed with.
Okay. I was going to say, because typically you hear a lot about a lot of women in the church as opposed to young men, being active and so forth. And there are some who believe that that is also a way to expose people to values that are consistent with not getting in trouble and so forth. And that's why I wanted to ask you, particularly for your age group. And I'm really pleased to hear that you're saying that faith is still important, whether you are actually in attendance or not. And we do hope that our listeners also think of that when they see young people, in whether or not they're in church or not, that this person still may have a faith base that will help them as they move forward in life. Now, let me go back to the one point that we talked about a little earlier about efforts to legalize medical marijuana. We know that in the news recently, there was much said about the college football players. I believe it was 4 college football players who were arrested at Texas Christian University for selling marijuana. And I wanted to go back to this point about the efforts to legalize marijuana. To what extent do you think that may be an additional problem with respect to many states and other jurisdictions considering this idea of legalizing marijuana right now for medical purposes, but to what extent will people start seeing this as a way to make money?
I think if they do legalize it, it can possess a problem, because that would mean more easy access for it. But then at the same time, like I said, if we do legalize it, it can help out those who do have certain medical conditions. Like, I had people in my family who had certain medical conditions, and if they needed marijuana, it could help them out. However, if we legalize it, though, it could possess a problem for our youth. Maybe they feel like that our youth can get to it easier. Same with alcohol. Like, I know some places, if you go in and buy liquor, they might ask for your ID, but some places slip up. They might not ask for your ID. So that can possess a huge problem. So I think that's one of the main reasons why I think they're not letting it go. They're not trying to legalize it so soon.
I was going to say we had Senator Muse on, and he talked about this very issue before the Maryland General Assembly, that he did receive a number of letters and comments from folks who were suffering and that was one of the bases for giving a lot of consideration for legalizing it. But he also pointed out that there will be, if in fact it is passed in Maryland, especially, there will be a lot of checks and balances on the dispensaries that are actually giving it out at, the places where it may be located and so forth. And we certainly hope that that will be the case.